When most people think of depression, they imagine someone who can't get out of bed, someone who's down or maybe crying all the time, someone who's clearly struggling, or at least they appear to be often struggling. But what if depression doesn't look like that at all? What if it looks like waking up, going to work, answering texts, laughing at the right moments, smiling when you should, doing everything you're supposed to do, and still feeling nothing? No deep sadness, no obvious breakdown, just this quiet, flat absence. That's what we're diving into today: depression. Welcome back to another episode of The Quest for Self. I'm so happy you're here. Now, I want to make something really clear from the beginning. I'm not here as an expert, I'm not here to tell you what to do, and I'm definitely not here to diagnose anyone. I just want to talk about depression in a way we don't usually hear, because a lot of people are struggling in silence and don't even realize that what they're experiencing really counts. So if you've ever thought, why don't I feel like myself anymore? Or nothing is wrong, but nothing feels right either, then this conversation's for you. Welcome back to another episode of The Quest for Self. I'm your host, Allie. I'm so happy that you're here today. Welcome back to another episode of The Quest for Self. I'm your host, Allie, and I'm so happy that you're back. Before we go any further, I want to set a really clear container for this episode. This is not medical advice. It's not a diagnosis, and it's not meant to replace therapy, medication, or any sort of professional support in any way. This is lived experience. This is reflection. This is a conversation, not a prescription. You don't need to take notes. You don't need to fix anything while listening. You don't even need to fully relate to everything I say. This episode is simply an invitation to notice. It's for anyone who feels off, flat, disconnected. And maybe you're functioning. Maybe you're doing what you're supposed to do, but something underneath it all doesn't feel aligned. Because one of the hardest parts about depression is that sometimes we don't recognize it while we're in it, especially when we're still doing okay on the outside. I want to share a little context, not to make this about me, but so you understand where I'm coming from. I've struggled with depression at different points in my life. About 8 years ago, I moved to a new country. No friends, no family, no sense of direction. Every day felt like waking up without an anchor. More recently, I went through another period that completely shifted my world. My mom had a severe stroke, and in many ways, the version of my mom that I knew, the one I grew up with, was gone. Even though she's still alive, I've had to grieve someone who's still here and learn how to love a completely different version of her. Shortly after that, a long-term relationship ended, and suddenly the future I thought I was building didn't exist anymore. There were days when getting out of bed felt heavy, not dramatic, just heavy. And what I want to emphasize here is I noticed the pattern. I noticed the pattern I was in, and I knew I didn't want to stay there. That awareness, it didn't fix everything, but for me, it was a first step back towards myself. I want to zoom out for a moment. Depression is far more common than most of us even realize. According to the World Health Organization, over 280 million people worldwide experience depression. That's about 5% of adults globally. 5%. In the US alone, millions of adults report symptoms every year, and more than 1 in 10 adults took prescription medication for depression in 2023, with especially high rates among younger generations. And yet, despite how common it is, so many people never get support. Not because they don't need it, but because we misunderstand what depression is supposed to look like. We think it has to be obvious, visible, dramatic. And when it isn't, we tell ourselves it doesn't count. That misunderstanding is one of the biggest reasons depression gets unnoticed, especially in people who are still functioning. I mean, it's certainly why I didn't recognize it in myself right away. For a long time, I thought depression meant crying all the time or not being able to get out of bed. I didn't realize it could look like losing interest in things I used to love, turning on a show I used to enjoy and feeling nothing, seeing something funny, not even breaking a smile. Depression doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like numbness. Sometimes it looks like distraction. And other times it looks like staying busy so you don't have to feel. It could look like responding when you're supposed to, showing up where you're expected, doing everything right on the outside while feeling empty on the inside. And that's what makes it so tricky because some people withdraw, some people overfunction, some people laugh through it. And just because someone is functioning doesn't mean they're okay. When it doesn't scream, we convince ourselves it doesn't matter, but it does. There have been times in my life when I was formally diagnosed with depression. There were other times when I wasn't diagnosed, but I recognized the symptoms. I did see a psychiatrist on one occasion and I was prescribed medication. I tried it. For me personally, it didn't work. I had a really difficult experience. But that doesn't mean medication doesn't help people. I know many people that's helped tremendously. It just means depression isn't a one size fits all, and neither is healing. I'm not sharing this because I have it all figured out. I'm sharing it because I've been there. I want to be really clear. What I'm about to share isn't a prescription. These are just things that have helped me when I felt flat and disconnected. What worked for me might not work for you, and that's okay. I didn't get better by fixing my life. I got better by reconnecting with it. What helped wasn't motivation, it was momentum. And momentum doesn't start big, it actually starts small. One of the biggest shifts for me was realizing that sometimes you don't wait for your feelings to change, you let your body lead first. There were days when I didn't feel like smiling, but I would literally make myself smile for 1 whole minute. Not because I was happy, but because I was choosing to care. And it sounds silly, but it matters. There's actually research that shows that forcing a fake smile can send signals to your brain that help regulate your nervous system. Another thing that helped me was music. Not background noise, intentional music. I'd ask myself, what song has ever made me want to move? Even just once. And sometimes I wouldn't want to, but I'd put it on anyway, and I'd dance alone in my room, in the living room, in front of a mirror. I'd just dance. Movement doesn't have to be the gym, it doesn't have to be an excessive workout or a 4-mile hike or run. It doesn't even have to be productive, it just has to be honest. I also focused on small acts of self respect. I took a shower. I did my hair. I changed out of my PJs. I did my makeup. Not for anyone else, but because it helped me feel something. Those moments weren't about looking better, they were about reminding myself that I mattered. I went back to therapy. I started journaling. I started writing, even when I didn't know what on earth to write. Sometimes it was just, I feel off today. And that was enough. What I learned is this: you don't climb out of depression all at once, you build little bridges back to yourself. I want to say this gently: depression is not a failure. It doesn't mean you're weak, it doesn't mean you're broken, and it doesn't mean that this is who you'll be forever. Depression does not define you. It's something you're experiencing, not who you are. And experiencing it doesn't cancel out the joy you're capable of or the life that's still ahead of you. If you take nothing else from this episode, let it be this: feeling nothing is still feeling something, and it deserves care. You don't have to be falling apart to be struggling. You don't have to be in pain for it to matter. And you don't have to have words for what you're feeling to take it seriously. Depression doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it goes quiet. And even then, even when it's completely quiet, it counts. So if today all you could do is breathe, if all you could do is show up, if all you could do is listen until the end, that still matters. Because every step you take, even the smallest ones, they all lead you to a better version of yourself. And some days, the step isn't moving forward, it's choosing to care. So let that be enough for today. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Quest for Self. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if this episode resonated with you, give it a like, follow, or share it to someone who you think may need to hear the message. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media, The Quest for Self.